Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order this morning and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Inuit, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 41st Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Brent McIntyre, and I'll be chairing the panel today. Zooming in is Diane Knight and Michelle Duncan. Our secretary for the hearing is Jason Robertson, and the assessor for the city of Winnipeg is Roddy Pontanilla. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note that you're placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you can leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed, with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 7 on our docket today. Mr. Robertson, please affirm the assessors and the applicant's testimony. Thank you.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Roddy Pontanilla.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you very much. The first property on the docket is 1251 Portage Avenue. And is there any preliminary issues either party with this property?
No. None for myself.
Okay, Roddy, you can proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chairman, board members there. First on the docket we have is file 22-1147. The roll number is 1301-084-8000. The address is 1251 Portage Avenue. The 2023 assessment has gone out at $1,863,000, and I do have a recommendation to make on this file. So if you're scrolling down to my income page, I believe it's on page 8, you can see the pictures of the subjects. We don't really need to come back to that, and it's the McDonald's there on Portage Avenue. And then on page 8 is my income stream. So I'll give you guys a second to get there. And so originally we had the tenant as a C0 fast food tenant in the modeling system, 3,388 square feet at $37.32 per square foot. We do have a vacancy of 6%, expense of 3%, and a shortfall of $8 per square foot to give us a net operating income of $113,662, which we've then applied a modeled cap rate of 6.10 to give us our original value of $1,863,000. For the recommendation, there's going to be 2 points that we are going to be making some adjustments on. The first area of adjustment due to some market data points and some internal work done here in regards to some other files of similar nature, we have decided to offer a revised rent rate of $34 per square foot. So that gives us a new total potential rent of $115,192. From there, we are applying the model parameters of a 6% vacancy allowance, an $8 shortfall per square foot, and a 3% other to give us a revised net operating income of $103,406. And then from there, we have adjusted the cap rate as well, and we've increased it to 6.50%. And that gives us a revised recommendation of $1,591,000. And that is my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carrie, were you aware of this?
I was aware of it. We've narrowed the issues, but there's still a wee bit to go, so we'd like to proceed.
Okay, Roddy, continue with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So as we've already gone over the pictures leading up to the recommendation, I won't take us back to that far. So I will, if I can direct your attention to page 7, and we can just begin on my market data there. So for market data, you'll note that I have included all comparables that are operated in the same manner as fast food type of restaurants. And you can see that we do have a rent rate ranging from, I believe it's $33.65 at the lower end, and then going up to as high as around $44, I believe, or $46 even. And then on page 8, we have the original income stream, which I don't really need to go over again since I offered a recommended revision on it, but nonetheless, it was revised to $34 per square foot, and then a 6.5% cap rate. On page 9, I do have the income value summary of the subject, although of course that's changed in relation to the recommendation that I provided. And then on page 10, we do have some cap rate information. Unfortunately, we don't have any on restaurants per se, but on the retail section, we do have strip malls, power center, neighborhood, and regional shopping centers. And then on page 11, I do have some Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 12, and taking us to the end of our brief, is the subject's income and expense mailer. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carrie, any questions?
Just a couple. And Mr. Chairman, there are a number of fast food restaurants on the docket, so I'd ask that the questions and replies just be carried forward so we don't have to do it once. If
That's fine.
makes sense. Okay. So Ms. Pontonia, thanks very much for your recommendation. I believe we've narrowed the issues then to, in this case, and I'm guessing a few others, we've narrowed it to capitalization rate and non-recoverable. So your revised, and I have this down, your revised cap rate is 6.5%, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And now with respect to cap rate, and you referenced the conclusions, the chart on page 10, the department, though, has not provided you with any information concerning specific transactions that resulted in those conclusions in these materials that I read, correct?
Can you rephrase that, Carrie? Sorry, I was trying to just work my way through that question.
No problem. Sometimes I do use lengthy sentences. Essentially, Mr. Pontonia, the department hasn't provided in your submission the transactions that would have gone into the derivation of the cap rate conclusions in your chart on page 10, correct?
Yep, I would say page 10 being my brief. Yes, that's correct, Carrie.
Okay. Now, I guess the only suggestion I'd have, Mr. Pontonia, notwithstanding that the department hasn't provided you with the specific transactions, if we go to your page 10,
yeah.
And we can agree that our valuation date is April 1 of 2020, or our reference date, I should use the correct term, is April 1, 2021, correct?
That's correct.
And that was in the, basically within about a month and a half or a month of the start of the pandemic.
I believe it started in 2020, Carrie.
Well, I think the WHO declared, certainly there are news reports in late 2020. I guess my recollection is I'd suggest that the actual declaration of the pandemic and the resulting shutdowns and such would have happened sort of starting in March of 2021. But that's okay. If our recollection differs a bit, there's not much that hinges on that. Now we are talking here, of course, here and with the docket this morning about restaurants, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now at the upper end, I'm just looking at the conclusions, but at the upper end of the closest analogy, and you're very forthright in your comments, Mr. Pontonia, there's no specific category for restaurants, but the closest analogy might be the strip, with a elevator, or the 80th percentile being at 6.8%, correct?
Yeah, that makes sense. I can agree to that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane, any questions?
You're saying the effective date is 88 to 2005. Do you have any interior pictures?
No, I don't have any pictures of the interior of this subject. I mean, one can look at the outside exterior cladding and deduce that there has been money that's been put into the subject over the years. So one can extrapolate that the interior would be of similar finish. And these are pretty standard McDonald's restaurant finishes. They don't vary too much from in my opinion, they don't vary too much from property to property. So no, to answer your question, I don't have any pictures.
Okay.
Interior, thank you.
That's really my only question. Thanks.
And Michelle.
Just in regards to utilizing the recommendation of 6.5 cap rate,
Yeah.
how did you, why 6.5, why not 6.8?
Well, it was in conjunction with looking at several of our fast food properties on the portfolio as a whole. It was seeing where the model had targeted the cap rates, and then some of the interior analysis that was done that just provided that I had looked at just led me to believe that a 6.5% cap rate for the fast food restaurants was reasonable. One has to remember that I would like to include that while Mr. Reimer is correct that the pandemic, I think that we differ a little. From my understanding, March 2020 is when the pandemic started. I can recall 2020 being the year. And while a lot of and I don't dispute that the retail section has faced a lot of challenges with the pandemic, I'm very aware of that and I'm sympathetic to it. I just want to add that in terms of the fast food restaurants, they were closed to dine in, but they were still open for takeout. So they weren't fully closed, as opposed to some of the other restaurants that were dine-in that were fully closed. These were able to have some business, but no doubt it is going to be hamstrung by the inability to have customers come in. So there's challenges for sure. But I just thought that, in my opinion, a 6.5% was reasonable for the subject property. And also in relation to the fact that I was sort of taking a homogenous approach and looking at the fast foods as a whole and sort of applying a rate that would seem reasonable for all the fast foods.
Thank you. No other questions.
Thanks.
Thank you. So you're prepared to stick with the 6.5 and not go to 6.8?
In my opinion, 6.5 is a good cap rate on it because we have also moved on the rental rates. So some of them were moved from, for example, this one 37 to 34. But we're going to see some of the other files come up where the rental rates are even higher, closer to the 40s. And I'm still going down to $34 per square foot with a 6.5% cap rate. So there is a little bit of a balancing act as well. I mean, we are already conceding on the rental rates as well, to concede as well on the cap rate. In my opinion, I think we have a good cap rate in place, but I'll leave it up to the board to decide different. That's my opinion on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And Terry, you can start your presentation.
And I apologize, Mr. Pontonia is exactly right. My memory being somewhat not as good as it used to be. March 2020, indeed, not March 2021. March 2020 was when the WHO declared the pandemic, and there had been news reports in the right at the end of the preceding year, if the board might recall, about some of the situations in some of the other countries. But yes, March 2020. So we are, just to be clear, we are in agreement. March 2020 was when the WHO declared the pandemic.
Well, and I sat in on the last board.
Yeah.
And it was March
2020. Exactly right. So I apologize for that
okay.
The 2021. So I'm going to provide the board with a very brief context, just because there's so many commonalities with these files. The position, and I appreciate very much Mr. Pontonia's efforts. Certainly the issues, as I said, have been narrowed to non-recoverable and cap rate in most, not all, but most of the cases. From our perspective, what I'm going to ask the board to consider in our submissions relates to two things: the non-recoverable. I'm going to be very brief on that. But the capitalization rate we're suggesting in our submissions is obviously for restaurant operations being one of the most impacted industries from the pandemic. We're suggesting that the capitalization rate needs to be elevated very significantly, a little further than what Mr. Pontanier has recommended. So what I'm going to provide the board this morning in our capitalization rate analysis is some materials that we've gathered specifically relating to the impacts of on the restaurant industry. I am going to go through it very quickly though, because there's points in that study, notwithstanding that it's pretty long. I want to hone in on very specific points. If the board or Mr. Pontanier has questions about some of the other material that I don't go over, I welcome them. So in that context then, if we might turn, and Mr. Chairman and board members and Mr. Pontanier, if you might have your pens and or tablets handy I'm going to revise some of my figures. Fundamentally, the request that I had on a number of these fast food restaurants was a 7.25 cap. I will be amending that for the fast food restaurants to 7. And so what I'm going to provide to you is a revised, the NOI wouldn't change at all, but the capitalization rate, I'm going to amend my request and I'm going to give you the revised value based on a cap rate of 7. So if we might then turn, with all of that being said, to my main brief at 1251 Portage. And if we could go briefly to page 8. Ms. Knight had asked a question relating to the effective age, and I concur with Mr. Pontanier's comments. This building actually, there was a small, very small bit of work that was done in 1988. The building essentially was built in 1994. Again, a wee small addition later than that, but effectively it's a 1994 original age. And so I'm agreeing that this restaurant, as they are for very much the most part with these franchises, they are well maintained, and every once in a while they do a refresh and they come up with a new sort of branding and look, and this restaurant reflects that. So certainly no dispute or no question there. The effective age that the department's put on it and that we're assuming is correct is 2005. So then just at the bottom of page 8, you can see this is the McDonald's at the corner of Erin and Portage. So if we then go to, please, page 13. And again, I propose to just go through this once, if that meets with the board's approval. We attached, it is attached for reference should the board wish to do so. We've attached a StatsCan article that talks about the impact specifically on this industry as of April 1, 2021, or the report was just a month prior. But it talks about some of the devastating effects on the restaurant industry generally. And the bullet points on page 13, I won't go through them all verbatim, but effectively, you can see by May of 2020, so just a few months in, employment had declined by nearly 56%, with a decline of 29% in December of 2020. So what had tended to happen was the initial shutdown in March, the very hard shutdown, brought many industries to a virtual halt, including, obviously including the restaurant industry. As the pandemic, as it progressed and as sort of the government got its legs out under it, as far as when to shut down, when to reopen, the limited reopenings, there was, it wasn't a smooth process throughout, but certainly a process that reinforced the view that the restaurant industry generally bore a very significant brunt of all of this, both the government mandated shutdowns, but also just the general climate. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. GDP in the industry fell 39.5% in March, and then another 40% in April. So obviously huge declines in the GDP for the restaurant industry. Sales decreased 61%, and then an additional 18% between September and December of 2020. Again, after there had been some gains in the summer, reflecting that sort of variation in the ebb and flow of the pandemic and the various restrictions. This is interesting. The significant portion of food services and drinking places experienced a decline of 40% or more in revenue for 2020, and that's for the year compared with 19. And a majority of the operations, it states, are uncertain of how long they can continue operating before considering closure or bankruptcy. Now, obviously, when we're talking about fast food restaurant chains, it would be certainly if a franchisee is unable to make a go of it, that would have a direct impact. I'm not suggesting that all these fast food restaurants were closing up, but it's a sign of very significant issues in the industry, and it impacts fast food restaurants just as it would impact other non-chain restaurants. But it's just a function of the capacity of these restaurants ultimately to weather the storm and to and to continue on despite those drops in revenues. The last bullet, the majority of food services and drinking places were, uncertain of business survival, with half of food services and drinking places in Q1 of 21 now, so just prior to the reference date, being uncertain as to how much longer they can operate before being forced to close or declare bankruptcy. Then there's on page 14, there's another summary chart from Restaurant Canada. They also talked about similar statistics. Monthly employment, they said, declined by 50% between March and April of 2020. In May of 2020, the survey conducted by this organization said that most food services businesses might not have enough cash flow to successfully reopen their doors. And certainly there were very, very significant closures for, for the local operators. And by August of 2020, 10% of them had actually permanently closed. Even in February of 21, there were 319,000 fewer food service jobs. So in that environment, the restaurant industry generally, and it would impact, as I say, my respectful submission, the fast food restaurant industry were very, very seriously impacted by the effects of the pandemic, which was ongoing as of the reference date. Page 15, I'm not going to belabor this, but I do want to make a couple of, give you a couple of thoughts as to the rents and the situation with the rental rates. If you recall, Mr. Pontini and I, with the recommendation that has been made, we are now agreed on the net rental rate of $34 a foot. So that's very much appreciate that we're able to narrow that issue. Having said that, the capitalization rate request that you're going to hear from me is ultimately based on, and the board members and Mr. Pontini will appreciate this, you can't plug in a cap rate in isolation from the rest of the parameters. If you are applying a premium rent, then of course the capitalization would, the risk in that rental or that revenue stream increases, and you have to reflect that in your cap rate. So the $34 rate, notwithstanding Mr. Pontini's thoughts as to what the $34 rate might mean relative to the original rate applied by the model, the $34 rate in my respectful submission still represents a premium rate for these fast food locations in the context specifically of the pandemic. We do have, there's quite a number of restaurant comparables, as you can see on the chart on page 15. They're all, to be clear, they're all restaurants. If the board wants to make a note, I'm going to give you the index numbers of the standalones, because there's a number of restaurants in very well located retail locations that are not standalone. These rents in those locations, because of the premiums quality of the sites, would reflect that premium quality. But in terms of the standalones, it's indices 2, 3, 7, 8, 10, 13, and 14. So again, that's 2, 3, 7, 8, 10, 13, and 14. Within those standalones, then, I do make a note, and this speaks to my submission as to the premium rental stream that continues to be applied at the $34. The one standalone restaurant lease, and this again is a chain restaurant, very, very good quality, newer age, index number 14. It's a 2010 build at a significant shopping center on Portage Avenue. And it was renewed in November of 2020. So in the midst of the pandemic and the conditions we're talking about at $26.50. I'm not suggesting, to be clear, I'm not suggesting $26.50. I'm agreeing with the $34 rate, but what I am saying very, very clearly is that still in the context of the pandemic represents a premium rate, and the cap rate must reflect that in my opinion. So then if we go to page 17, please, which is the, and I apologize on my paper copy, it's not numbered, but it's the income valuation. So in the income valuation, we're applying the $34 rent, and the difference in the calculation of the NOI, of course, relates to non-recoverables. We're continuing to buy the 5% there. And here's where my revision comes in. I've heard Mr. Pontanilla, he and I and members of the department have had a chance to review these operations, and I've heard what they've said. I'm not there yet with what they're recommending, but I am suggesting that the cap rate, an appropriate cap rate here would be 7% rather than the 7.25%. And so using my NOI of 99,075 and the 7% cap rate, the revised request is 1,415,1415000. So if I might, Mr. Chairman, again, just the one time go through the non-recoverables very briefly and the capitalization rate. Could we start please with the non-recoverable study?
Just let me get it up here.
Let me know when you're there. Am I going too fast? No. Okay.
Oh, there it is. Has everybody got it? Oh, Roddy's muted.
I have it. I'm good. Thank you.
Michelle
Yes, thank you.
and Diane.
Yes, thanks. Got it.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you. So I propose to do this very briefly. Bottom of page 2. Fundamentally, of course, as you've heard, we believe this expense item relates to non-recoverable expenses that are not recovered under any circumstances, even with tenants on fully net terms. Bottom of page 2, second last paragraph. This is from the city assessor's previous manuals, and it states that even with net leases and competent management, there will still be expenses incurred by the landlord that are non-recoverable. Examples are processing payments and chasing bad debts, and we've got further leasing commissions being the main one for us. So we believe it's grounded, and we believe that's what the intent of the allowance was originally, and grounded in very, very sound logic. Then skipping to page 4 at the bottom, second last paragraph, we took a look at the appraisal theory.
Sorry, Carrie, Mr. Neufeld, I don't have that, what you're talking about. I'm on the pages that you're asking. I have the Altus rebuttal to the city apartment cap rates and the apartment cap rates. Where am I finding the other rebuttal? And
I don't think that's the docket.
The applicant, there should be one that's labeled.
Oh, hang on. Yes, you're right. I'm on tonight's. Sorry, I got the wrong. Sorry. Just give me a moment. I had the other one open earlier.
Too many SharePoints.
Yeah.
Let me know when you're there, Ms. Knight.
Yeah, it's getting there. Okay, expense study. Now I've got it. Thank you.
Ms. Knight, do you want me to start over or can I keep going?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Skipping then to the bottom of page 4, this is again grounded, or the appraisal theory that we looked at. Second last paragraph, the indented paragraph, the appraiser should also account for non-recoverable expenses. Most important non-recoverable cost items to be aware of are space marketing costs, which include both tenant inducements and leasing costs. Again, I stress we are not basing our analysis on the inclusion of TIs. And an allowance for structural or mechanical repairs. The other cost associated with leasing space is leasing fees or commissions, which we are specifically including. Then if we go to page 7, please. And this is out of the Saskatchewan Municipal Appraisal Manual. And they specifically talk about non-recoverable operating expenses. They list 4, as you can see in the first half of page 7, legal and audit fees, which we are including. Structural repairs, we are specifically not including that in our 5%. That allowance historically has been covered by what's been known as the other expense item of 2%. We're treating structural repairs as falling within that valuation factor. Advertising and promotion, we are including, and leasing commissions, again, we are including. So if we skip then to page 10, middle of the page, we state for the 4 items that we have included in our analysis. Those are leasing commissions being the most significant by far, asset management fees, advertising, marketing, and professional fees. Asset management fees are rare, very rare in fact, but where they are reported, we've included them. So then on page 11, again, the right-hand column being for the board's information, not relying on that in any way, but the second column from the right being the analysis that we've done based on those items, just those items, ranging from a low of 2.6 to a high of 16.2, with an average of 6.64% and a median of 5.98%. So we believe the 5% is very well supported and is consistent with the original intent of the allowance. Starting at page 12 then, we've provided, this is new for this cycle, we've provided an analysis of the effect of reduction of the 5% allowance, either completely eliminating it to 0 or reducing it to 1%, which is probably more relevant to our discussions this morning. On page 13, and this is using the very same valuation factors from top to bottom, right from potential net income down through to the cap rate derivation based on the sale price. None of that changes. The only factor that changes is the non-recoverable expense item. So on page 13 in our example, the indicated cap rate is 7.38%. On page 14, the impact of eliminating it, reducing it to 0, results in a cap rate derivation of 7.79%, so an increase of 41 basis points. On page 15, again, this being probably the most relevant, if the cap or the non-recoverable expense is reduced to 1%, then the indicated cap rate using those same factor or assumptions is 7.71%, an increase of 33 basis points. The reason I'm presenting all of this is, if you recall, Mr. Chairman and board members, our capitalization rate analysis includes the full 5%. The mathematical effect of reducing it to 1% would have the result typically of increasing the capitalization rate to conclusion by roughly 30 to 33 basis points. Our request then would be, if the board were inclined to reduce the allowance to 1%, our request and our capitalization rate would increase by 25 basis points. We've just sawn off the amended request at 25 basis points, notwithstanding that the mathematical impact is a little higher. So I will leave that for the board to consider and then ask that we move to the capitalization rate study. And Mr. Chairman, please again, let me know when you're there.
I'm there, but it won't open up. Oh, it just opened up. I guess an IT problem. Okay, I'm there. Everybody there? Yeah.
Okay, as I mentioned, I'm going to hone in on some very specific elements. The cap rate study is very obviously substantial, but I'm going to hone in on just the elements that pertain to this asset category. By all means, if the board members and Mr. Pontinia have questions on things I haven't talked about, happy to go through it. We talk about, starting on page 8. Page 8 really is where we had some materials prior to that. This was all pre-pandemic and sort of setting the stage for retail generally, talking about trends in e-commerce and some of the things that were happening with brick and mortar business models. But for our purposes, what I prefer to focus on starts at actually page 9. There was a survey done, and this is, again, in the pandemic environment, there was a survey done and the article's attached by University Canada West. And this was a survey done in the context of the pandemic. And one of the questions that they, or issues that they went through on page 9 is the sort of very permanent changes, they call it, likely very permanent changes in the retail industry. And one of the items they focused on related to consumption of food and drinks at home and going out to restaurants. And if you look at the chart on page 9, it's sort of a bar chart, a horizontal bar chart. On the right-hand side, you can see a number of items that would have direct application to the properties we're discussing this morning. You can see that consuming food and drinks at home, are you engaging in any of the following more or less frequently? And in terms of the consuming food and drinks at home, these 56% said they were conducting that less frequently. So a very substantial proportion, for obvious reasons, had cut down, more frequently, and they had basically they were preparing food and drink at home due to the fact that they didn't want to go out to the restaurants in the pandemic environment. Again, baking and cooking at home, 51% said they were doing that more, 44% said about the same. Ordering food for pickup or delivery, and that has obviously direct application here. 37% said they were doing that more frequently, 34% said they were doing it about the same, and 16% said that they were doing it less frequently. So you've got two situations here in the context of the fast food restaurants that we're talking, this one and some of the other ones. You've got a drive-through operation where roughly a third or just over a third of folks said they were, using pickup and delivery services more frequently. But certainly in my respectful submission, that cannot account for the substantial drop in the in-person dining that these types of restaurants obviously are built around a business model that has two fundamental components, the drive-through being one, but the sit-down component being very substantial as well, including some of the operations, and I'm not sure, it's not this one, but some of the operations, if you recall, board members recall, have play place, and they've got things set up specifically for to encourage people to use their sit down facilities. So in that context, with more people consuming substantially more frequently, more people consuming food and drinks at home, some uptick in the fast food pickup and delivery, certainly that relates to the drive-through business. But then a very significant component, obviously going out less and not using the dine-in functions. Now, I'm going to then skip to page 24, please. So if you recall, I've amended my capitalization rate request from 7.25%, which is stated in the brief, to 7%. The capitalization rate conclusions that we've come to, pardon me, and all of the information is attached as to how we got to the rates that we summarized on page 24. You can see there's a number of properties that traded both before and a couple that traded during the pandemic. I want to draw the board's attention to index number 13. And the reason I do that, it's a property on William Avenue. It's very, very close to the Health Sciences Center, very close, in fact. And this is a property that it's not a drive-through operation, but it's got 3 restaurant tenants. So this is a restaurant property located very close to it. The location would be considered superior because of its proximity to HSC. And that traded at a rate of 6.85%, assuming you apply the full 5% non-recovered. I give this for the board's information, if you reduce the non-recoverable from 5 to 1, the indicated cap rate is 7.08%. So of the transactions, that's probably the most most relevant, and certainly the most comparable, being restaurant operations. And it's not mom and pop shops that are in there, it's chain restaurants that are in there, designed more for, there is some seating in at least 2 of them that I recall, but the focus of those operations is much more on picking it up and taking it out and taking it with you. So very similar to what we're talking about this morning. So at 6.85% with the full 5% non-recoverable, that's the reason for my adjustment to a rate of 7% in this case, to sort of be more in line with that. If we turn very briefly to page 31, at the bottom of page 31, that's the property we're talking about on William Avenue, and you can see the photo of it there. So then, with all of that information, I go back to my page 17 of my main brief and request that the assessment be revised to reflect the market rent of $34, the remaining parameters there, as I've indicated, including the application of the 5% non-recoverable, but amending the capitalization rate to 7%. And that then results in a value of $1,415,000. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess we'll look at the expense study and the cap rate study and then go back to your main brief for questioning. So Roddy, any questions on the expense study?
No, I'm okay on the expense study.
Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
And then
I actually did have a question this time because I caught something here on page 7 of your study where you said that apart from Saskatchewan, it said leasing commissions would be used in times of high vacancy. So what would you consider high vacancy?
I don't accept the premise of high vacancy, and I'll tell you why, Ms. Knight. Again, the 5% allowance in our respectful submission goes to a stabilized expense item that applies year in and year out. And what we're trying to do, and what I suggest the original intent was, is to come up with a stabilized figure that applies even when in years where it's much higher and in years where it's much lower. And your question is a good one. And the reason I say that is this, and I'm going to give the example of this property. So imagine that that McDonald's decides to vacate, and it does, you know, these properties do have vacancies every now and again, and they do very often they actually convert if the chain decides to leave. But in any event, if you've got a property that goes from 100% occupied to fully vacant, then you've got leasing commissions that are going to be payable based on that full, you know, the full 100% vacancy. What that is going to do, the result of that is going to be, and I'm going to use round figures. So if one assumes $100,000 per annum net lease rate, just it's not what I'm suggesting, but just by way of example, you've got $100,000 per annum for this restaurant site. And let's say you've got typically with these operations, you'd want a minimum 5-year term, preferably 10, but a minimum 5-year term. So over that 5-year term, then you've got a $500,000 revenue stream, $100,000 per year. The leasing commissions on that are going to be based, typically the commissions are based, and the percentages can change. I've seen different percentages, but what I've seen very often in the past is a percentage range of between 4 and 5%. So if you've got even a 4% leasing commission payable, the owner can report it in one of two ways. Either they can basically match the leasing commission expense in each year of the 5-year term. So it would be in that scenario, $4,000 for each of the 5 years. Or what I've seen more commonly actually is you pay the leasing commission, in this case, 4 years times the $500,000 total rent is $20,000. They would actually report that $20,000 expense in year one, and then it would be 0,000. That $20,000 expense, of course, equals 20%. It's an expense, non-recoverable expense of 20% of the potential net rent. So we're stabilizing it at the 5%. And with respect to when you're talking about elevated vacancies, I don't believe it would be appropriate to make the distinction between the non-recoverable expenses at times of elevated vacancies versus when it's, you know, either stabilized at a lower amount or zero. But that's the very reason why we're doing the stabilization that we have. If I, and I do appreciate the question, Ms. Knight, because this, I don't often have a chance to get into some of these details. On page 11, this is the very reason in the non-recoverable expense study that you're going to see lows. Some years, quite bluntly, some years for some of these properties, the expense was virtually zero. The non-recoverables were almost nothing. But in other years, they were upwards of, 20%, 25%, or even higher. And that's a function of particularly the ebbs and flows of the leasing commissions payable, where they reported all in that year that the expenses incurred, and also some other, professional fees and advertising, marketing.
Right.
But that's the very reason, Ms. Knight, a low of 2.6 up to a high of 16. And so we believe the 5% captures that stabilized amount at a very reasonable level, accounting for these ebbs and flows. So I thank you for that question.
I do have one more question on your cap rate study where I can't find it now where that graph was. Was there any questions of the restaurant owners because their expenses would have gone down from not having the same number of employees to their income coming in? Is there a ratio of how much that drop actually was?
Sorry, Ms. Knight, we're not, are you talking about the
So now I'm in your cap rate study. Okay. There was that little graph you had.
Okay, yes. So on page 9, you're talking about that chart.
Thank you. Yeah, that one. So now these are asking questions of people who ordered more food for pickup, 37% more, consuming more food and drinks at home, 56% more. But let's look at the restaurant side of that. So on the restaurant side, they've got less employees, less expenses for food coming in because they're less going out. Was there ever any study done on major chain restaurants to see how much that impact really was? Because if your expenses go down, and your income goes down, is it relevant or is it more of a loss?
No, I would say absolutely it's relevant. So again, very, very astute question, but when these operations are built on, the number of employees and so, sorry, I'm going to take a half step back. Could I ask the board members and Mr. Pontinia, I don't know if it's possible, but with reference to that graph that Ms. Knight referenced, could we please go back to my main submission now on page 13? Because I just want to talk about some of these trends. So Ms. Knight, your question is a very good one in that you've got the employee cost essentially being a variable cost. So as you reduce the number of employees, that variable cost is going to go down, which I think is what you're getting to as some of your revenue. Let's say basically in the most dire situations during the pandemic, complete shutdown of in-person restaurants. So all you've got is a drive-through business. So absolutely the number of employees that you would require to just operate the drive-through is going to go down, and therefore that's an expense that's reduced. But when you're talking about the revenue reductions we're talking about, and I'm going to refer specifically to on page 13, the fourth bullet, where it says a significant portion of food services and drinking places, okay, 40% decline in revenue.
Okay.
But I guess, Ms. Knight, my suggestion would be don't forget that the number of employees is one and only one cost, but you've got all kinds of fixed costs. You've got
correct. I understand that.
Yeah.
I do understand that. It's just I was wondering if there was anything opposed to fast food restaurants like McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, as opposed to the keg or something.
Yeah, no, I understand the question, and my response would be, first of all, no, I'm not aware of any formal studies, but the question is a good one. But I'd suggest that the margins are going to slim up a lot because while you can still operate the drive-through, you've got all these fixed costs and they're substantial.
Right, and I understand that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's all. Thanks.
That was a lot of comments for a yes or no answer.
Sorry.
Look, lawyers used to get paid by the word. Did you know that?
Yes.
Sorry.
So where are we now? Roddy, did you have any questions on the cap rate study?
I didn't have any questions. You know what? I did actually have a question on the cap rate study. Sorry, I was going to say I only had just a few questions in regards to the subject property itself. But if we are talking about the cap rate study, sure.
Yeah, let's get rid of the cap rate study and then go back to.
So, Mr. Reimer, on page 24 of your cap rate study, I know that you had pointed us to index 13, which was William Avenue, and then that was the, I believe you said it was the restaurants that were there.
Yes.
And so that was the one that you had pointed us to at the with the cap rates there showing of 6.85% to 7.08, depending on whether you, I guess, include or take out the non-recoverables.
Yes.
And so my question to you is do you think that's relevant to have this as one of the examples to provide in the context of them not having any sort of a drive-in or any sort of an ability to stay open? Because I do feel like there is a little bit of a difference between dine-in that was shut down during the pandemic, which I do not dispute whatsoever, as opposed to the drive-in restaurants that still had the ability to maintain a business. And the reason why I ask this question is because we are talking about a higher cap rate to account for the risk. And so really my inquiry is that was there as much of a risk? In other words, does the cap rate need to go up as much for these particular subjects as opposed to, for example, some of the dine-in restaurants that we have that are coming up on the docket as well? So I just wanted to inquire on that.
Yeah, no, your question's a fair one. And absolutely, I would say it's by bar none, the best and most relevant indicator of the comparables of all the specific transaction related information we've got. It's a transaction that occurred fully within the pandemic. It's a transaction that occurred with 3 different restaurants occupying it. And Mr. Pontinia, your point is well received about the drive-through, but don't forget my previous comments. The drive-through is simply one of 2 fundamental components for these businesses, the other being the sit-down component. And when you're talking about, my suggestion would be, and this is where I go back to Ms. Knight's question about the studies, the operations of the McDonald's like this one. If one assumes just drive-through operations, that's not sustainable. I just don't accept the premise it's sustainable. So the risk would be elevated substantially. And at the end of the day, as I mentioned, these particular restaurants, these restaurants are also not designed for sit-down operations. They don't have drive-through, but they're designed for people to come in, pick up their food and go out, or have quite frankly, have the food delivered, which gets back to that chart I talked about. So I agree with you, Mr. Pontinia, it doesn't have a drive-through, but I very much disagree. This is by far, I'd suggest, given the timing of the transaction and the fact that it involves these chain restaurants, fast food type of restaurants, very, very relevant to our discussion.
Okay, thanks, Gary.
Any other questions, Roddy?
I could segue into I just had a couple minor questions in regards to the subject itself. If you want me to segue into that, because it is a little bit relevant, I am kind of
Well,
cap rate.
I haven't made a comment on the studies yet.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then you can do yours, and then I'll just ask a couple questions afterwards.
So with the expense study, I've seen that document numerous times in this cycle, and I have no questions. And Michelle, do you have any questions on the cap rate study?
No, I don't. Thank you.
And Diane, you asked your question on the cap rate study?
I did, yeah, thanks.
And I have no questions on the cap rate study. So now we can proceed to the main docket or main brief. And Roddy, any questions?
Yeah, so just a couple, I guess inquiries, I guess masked as questions, but they are questions in any case. So Mr. Reimer, again, I appreciate all your presentation. You provide a lot of really good information, and I do not dispute that the restaurants have had challenges during the pandemic. That much we are definitely in agreement on. My only sticking point again is that we are talking, and we are very close, so we don't have much of a difference, but 6.5 to 7%, I just wanted to talk a little about that. And so I just had a couple questions in relating to that, because as I understand, the elevated cap rate that you're applying is because of the increased risk that the restaurants suffered and that they are suffering, or that they did suffer, I should say, during the pandemic as we were making our way through it. And so 7% of a cap rate, I appreciate that you did come down a little bit to reflect that perhaps 7.25 might have been a little, maybe a little bit higher than what would have been appropriate for the restaurant. So I appreciate that. I only have two questions. Are you aware, did this property actually shut down during the pandemic? Was there vacancy that this subject occurred, or did it remain open throughout the pandemic?
The in-person operations the in-person operations obviously would have shut down at numerous points through 2020 and the government mandated shutdowns are. The drive-through operations at the very front end, as I understand it, there was some, again, as the government was getting its legs under it as far as what they needed to do, it would have been impacted, but the drive-through operations for the most part would have continued on being that component. So no question, but don't okay, go ahead. That would be my response to that one.
Thanks, Kerry. I appreciate that. And then my second question is are you aware if the subject received any CECRA grant funding? Was there any funding provided for any of the challenges that the subject faced during the pandemic?
In response to that question, I'm going to say move to page 31, please.
Of your brief, sorry?
Yeah, or of my main brief.
Okay.
So if you look at the bottom of page 31, has the property received any government funded assistance? And they've put NA, so I take that to mean no.
Okay. Not available. Okay.
Well, not applicable because they're owner occupied. They didn't apply for it.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Kerry. Those are the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane, any questions on the main brief?
No, thanks.
And Michelle?
The only type of income expense reference I see is the owners on page 29. Is there any other income or expense statements for that period?
No, this would be the expenses for the property. Pardon me. Of course, so they're not reporting any rental revenue. They're owner occupied, and that would be the expense items for 2020 that I've included. I haven't included anything further.
Yeah, so they say they went in the hole, right? The net operating income's 268,363 in the hole. They made nothing.
Oh, but don't forget, Ms. Duncan, that's based on, because they're not reporting any rental revenue. The NOI there is misleading, of course, because we're applying the full $34 rate, whereas they're just showing zero because they're not paying any rent to themselves. So I'm not in any way looking at that figure.
Right, so there's just no actuals as far as what their revenue was.
Not the business revenue, no. No, that's why we're applying the $34 rental revenue though for the purpose of our valuation.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
And I have no questions, so that concludes the first property. The next one on the docket. Is there any preliminary issues on this one?
Which property is it?
That is 1327 Portage Avenue.
I can allow the, my understanding of it is that we are going to be confirming this one, but if Mr. Reimer has anything else to add, then he's free to be able to do that.
I do not. I am seeking confirmation, so to whatever extent we need to read it into the record. And
Yeah, I was just gonna get to that. Okay, Roddy, do you want to read in the information to the record?
Yeah, no worries. So next file that we have on the docket is 22-3126. The roll number is 13003674000. The address is 1327 Portage Avenue. And the 2023 assessed value has gone out at $260,000, and we're just seeking confirmation.
And Carrie?
we are just seeking confirmation under 54-1, please.
And Diane, any questions?
No, thank you.
Michelle?
No questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions, so that concludes that property. And the next one on the docket is 1873 Portage Avenue. And any preliminary issues on this one? Either party?
None for myself.
And none for Carrie? Okay, Roddy, you can proceed.
Okay, so up next we have file 22-3169. The roll number is 0702-025-5000. The address is 1873 Portage Avenue. The 2023 assessment has gone out at $624,000. And I do have a recommendation to make on this file. And then as we scroll down to the income stream, as always, if I can just have your attention to look at the pictures of the subjects, we don't have to come back up again. And you'll notice that it is a standalone restaurant that's being operated on the corner of Portage and Ferry Road as a pizza. And so if I can direct your attention to page 8 of my brief, where I have my income stream. So originally we had on file an A2 restaurant at 1,476 square feet at $25.81 per square foot. That gave us the modeled potential rent of $38,096. We have applied a model parameters of a 6% vacancy, a 3% expense, and an $8 shortfall per square foot to bring us to the modeled NOI of $34,028. And then we had a modeled cap rate applied of 5.45% to give us a revised value of, to give us the original assessment of $624,000. So after a review of the subject property, it was my opinion that the modeled rental rate of $25.81 is, $25.81 does seem to be a reasonable rental rate. I guess during my rec, I can just put in some comments that there was, it was brought to my attention that there was a potential difference in leasable area. So this recommendation that I'm offering, it is based on the leasable area that we have on file, and we can speak about that afterwards. But I wanted to just bring that to your attention because it is relevant to understanding this particular appeal. But with that being said, my recommendation is to maintain the rental rate at $25.81 per square foot. Nothing else changes there, and we have the same net operating income of $34,027. And I have increased the cap rate to 6% on this subject property. And that revises the value to $567,000 as a recommendation that I can put forth. Thank you.
572?
567.
Oh, 567. And Carrie, how do you feel about that?
Again, issues are narrowed, but We'd like to proceed.
Okay, Roddy, you can proceed with your presentation.
Okay, since we already took a look at the files, I'm assuming, or sorry, at the pictures of the subject, I'm assuming we don't have to go over that info again. And that was on page 2 to page 5. So if I can direct your attention to page 6, we can start there. So we do have a few sales on record for the subject. Several of them are at the $1 consideration range, so we're not putting any significant weight on any of these sales, but there is some sales information there. We do have a lease for the subject property, and that's sort of part of what I wanted to speak about, is that we do have it on file as 1,000 square feet at $29.52 per square foot. So that's the actual rate reported. And then for my rent comparable information on page 7, I have provided a list of standalone restaurants so we can get an idea of the lease information that's being received there. And then I do have a rental rate range from, it appears to be $17.40 at the lower end of the range, up to $27.04 at the higher end of the range. And we'll note that that $27.04 is for a similar style of business being run out of that space. And it is down the street from the subject, although it is also an older lease. So that has to be taken into consideration. And then on page 8, I did have my original income stream, which I've already gone over with you guys, so I don't think I need to beleaguer that again. But suffice it to say that I did increase it was my recommendation to increase the cap rate to 6%, which then gave us the revised value of $567,000. And then on page 9, I have the income value summary of the original income valuation that has gone out for the subject. On page 10, it's the cap rate information that we include. On page 11, it's the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts that we include with all our briefs. And then on page 12, and taking us to the end of the brief, we have the subject's income and expense mailer information. And I would like to sort of get ahead of this, I guess, issue that we have in terms of area. I don't have any of this information to provide, unfortunately, because this sort of was flagged to me after we've already done the exchange on it. So it wasn't included in the brief, and I apologize for that. But I did take a look into our records, and it does seem to be that in 2019 and 2020, those years was when the mailer began to list 1,000 square feet as the area, and it says approximately. So if we look on page 14, you'll note that in the subject's mailer, they do write approx 1,000. And that approx 1,000 actually began in 2019. So for the 2019 mailer and the 2020 mailer, we had approx 1,000. In 2018 and 2017, they actually list the square footage that we have on record of the 1,476 square feet. So that was the first issue that I found when I was looking into this discrepancy between the two. The other issue that I found is I did look into some mechanical plans that we have on file. So admittedly, these are a bit of an older plans that we had on file. It looks like the date we received it was from 2009. And I didn't include this in the mailer as well, or in the brief. So I apologize that I just have it in front of me. But I do have some building plans in front of me that do show these were made for mechanical, I guess, upgrades that were done to the building at the time. But they do show the building layout and the information on it. And this plan itself says that the store area in gross square feet is 1,515 square feet, whereas the store area in net is 1,376 square feet. So we have different points to consider here. We have 1,376, that's one measurement. We have 1,515, that's another measurement. We have 1,476 square feet, that's what the city has on record. And then we have the submission of the brief for the applicant, which has the subject listed at 1,000 square feet. So I would like to be very clear to the board that if I were to have been provided some solid information, you know, some updated building plans or records or something that I can sort of hang my hat on to show that the building is indeed approximately 1,000 square feet, I am open to adjusting the leasable area, which of course would have an effect on the overall value of the subject. But with that being said, it was the direction that I had received that we do need some more information in regards to it. So I am open to adjusting the leasable area, but we are going to need more than just the last 2 years of mailers, as there's a lot of contradictions throughout all the information that I looked at. And so I just wanted to jump ahead of that because I know that that's going to be one of the issues that is going to be apparent when Mr. Reimer gives his presentation. Yeah, besides that, that's my presentation. Thank you.
I just have one comment. How can a square building have 4 different leasable areas?
That's a good question. So there could have been an original, so in the early 2000s, there could have been some work that was done on it where some verifications were done. I did take a look at our field forms, and as far as I can see, I went to one that was from the early 2000s, and I looked, and it is listed as 1,476 square feet. So that same square footage from our field forms that I took a look at, it has carried forward and has remained the same throughout all this time. And I do want to stress that in 2019, they switched to approximately 1,000. And again, it's unfortunate that I didn't know this beforehand, or I would have included some screenshots to show that the declaration that was being provided for all the previous mailer all the previous mailer submissions, as far as I looked, they all listed 1,476 square feet. So, you know, again, I have no problem, you know, like we want to have accurate records here at the department. I'm open to making any sort of amendments to the leasable area, which in fact would have an amendment to the overall value of the property. So if it can be provided and proven that 1,000 square feet or thereabouts is the proper area to use, then we can make the adjustment accordingly, and that will have an effect on the realty value. It's I just need information. I need solid information for that.
And that's your presentation?
That's my presentation. Thank you.
And Carrie, any questions?
Thanks. And appreciate, Mr. Pontanilla, your diligence with respect to the area. I actually think it's, for our purposes this morning, it's going to distill to something a little more simple than all that. What I am going to suggest to you is, yeah, you and I need to get together and figure out the area on a go forward. But it actually distills to something I think a bit more simple, as I say. If we could go to your page 16, please.
Okay.
And this is the 10 verification form that I gather that the department got for the property. Mr. Pontanilla, what we can, regardless of, and I saw the same thing with the approximate 100,000 square feet, but what we can agree upon, I'm assuming, is under the monthly rent column, which is column 408.
Yep.
The monthly, whatever the actual area is, the monthly rent, I take it, we're not disputing that the monthly rent is $24.60 net, which equals an annual rent, net rent of $29,520. We can agree on that part.
Yeah, we can agree to that, Carrie. Yep, I see what you're saying.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, all previous questions, comments asked and answered on cap rate and non-coverables, if I might, and that's my only question.
Okay, thank you. Diane, any questions?
So just in regards to those previous mailers. So the previous mailers that showed 1,476 square feet, was it the same Pizza that was renting the 1,000 square feet at the time? And did it show somebody else for the 476 square feet?
No. It was the same tenant. So from my understanding, I don't want to misspeak, but so I'm just trying to go back in my head as to, actually not, if just give me 1 second here, I can. So I think I did include it on a file that I had. Just give me 1 second. I can answer that question. Okay, so what I can say definitively is it looks like there was, in 2017, we had the property owners were listed as and I won't say it for the sake of being discreet, but the property owner was listed as a certain corporation. In 2018, that same the owner was actually left blank on that mailer. And then on 2019, when they start rating approximately 1,000, there's a new property owner that's actually being listed. So that's a great question. It looks like, if I'm just looking at these mailers and trying to do some detective work on it, I would say that it looked like there was an owner change between 2017 and 2019. And after the new owners took over in 2019, that's when they started to declare approximately 1,000 square feet as their as their area that they're now declaring. So
So
yeah,
if we
again, I mean, it's complicated, right? I'm open to,
Right.
to adjusting it, but I just need some more information.
So if we were to think on that respect, that the previous owner used the full 1,476 square feet, the current owner now uses only 1,000. Was the previous owner also renting the other 476 square feet to somebody else, or they were just using the whole 1,476 square feet? And is there some kind of divider that has two different opportunities in the building?
Those are all great questions. I would say that Mr. Reimer might be better able to illuminate us, as that's his client there. I can only go on the information that I have in front of me, being on the
Okay.
city end of it. And
So you haven't been in the building to be able to see if there's a divider
I
or
mean,
something? Yeah.
no, I mean, I drive by it every day on my way home. I do live out west on Portage,
Yeah.
so I see it every day. But in terms of having gone in and having done a thorough inspection, no, I can't answer that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, any questions?
Did I just hear Mr. Reimer say you guys were agreeing on the rent?
Oh, no, I think Mr. Reimer was pointing my attention, and he can, I don't want to mean to put words in his mouth, but from my understanding, he just wanted to direct my attention to the annual rental value that was actually being declared on the mailer.
Yeah.
Just so we can agree on that, because I understand what he's saying, that, you know, we might have it as $29 per square foot based on 1,000 square feet. But I did the math on it, and if you use our square footage, it does lower the rental rate. Obviously, as we include more area and the same amount of annual rental value, the price per square foot is going to decrease, obviously, as the area increases, as there's a relationship between the two. But with that being said, yeah, it does make a difference. And I did, as a thought process, I did look into how the model would change if I were to adjust the area, and it does make a difference. So if Mr. Reimer wants to get together with me, and I'm not really sure if we go together per se, or if he can provide maybe some updated building plans just to show what the area is. I'm open to making any amendments when it comes to the physical size of the subject. So that's always part of my job to do, is to make sure we have accurate records.
Okay, and then there's no permits, obviously, through that time frame, is there or not?
I did take a look at the permits, if you just want to give me a second here. So I had made a note for myself. So when I take a look at permits, when I'm doing my reviews, I often take a look at high permits of value, just to see, because some of the smaller permits, there might be a permit for a sign that went up or something. They're not very significant. So I always look for high value permits to see if any money was being put in. And from what I looked online or in our database, I couldn't find any permits of note. So that would tell me that it's from my research, I couldn't see anything that would indicate to any significant amount of money being put into the subject.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Thanks.
And I have no questions. So Carrie, you can start with your presentation and probably give us some advice as to what the size of this thing is.
Yeah, so if we could keep Mr. Pontania's brief open just for a minute, could we turn to page 14? Because I want to get to Ms. Knight's question. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Knight asked the question to Mr. Pontania if he had physically been in the space. I want to be clear, I have not physically been there. I took the 1,000 square feet in my analysis as fairly representing the area, but recall my focus is actually on the revenue that's being generated. When you look at page 14, it very much appears to us, and I'm going to confirm this, but I'm very confident that Pizza leases the entire building and that there's no separate space that's segmented. They talk about the average percentage of space vacant is 0, which is at line 302.
Yeah.
Number of tenants at 303 being 1. I cannot say, because I haven't physically been in there. I'm not going to suggest I can say with 100% certainty, but I'm very confident that Pizza occupies the entire space, and that this notion that, or this reporting of approximately 1,000 square feet, that's where the error in the area may lie. At the end of the day, can we turn then to my brief on page 15, just very, very quickly. On page 15, I have applied the 1,000 square feet, and I am going to suggest Mr. Pontania and I will investigate this a little further in due course. But at the end of the day, the rent that I'm applying, if you recall my question as to the calculating the monthly rent to an annual rate, it is the $29,520 I think the owner is being somewhat lax in his reporting of square feet because it's the annual rent that has been reported with 100% accuracy. That's what he believes to be relevant, and that is the 29,520 that I've applied. That is based on the March of 2018 lease for the subject property, for the entire property, as I understand it. So then moving to page 17. Again, I'm going to amend my capitalization rate request for the reasons we've talked about to 7%. And my revised request, and this is using the total potential rent that is being generated under that March 18 lease of 29,520, same NOI at 7%. The indicated value is 362,000. And for all the reasons we've discussed, that's my request. Thank you.
So 349 to 362.
362, yep. Using 7%.
And Roddy, any questions?
No questions. I would just like to ask, Mr. Chair, that you just carry forward the comments from our previous, our first discussion, as they, like Mr. Reimer suggested, they apply to the majority of our files. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Diane, any questions?
No, thanks.
And Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. So we'll move to the next one on the docket, which is 2475 Portage Avenue. Any preliminary issues with this property? Either party?
None from me, thank you.
Okay, Roddy, you can proceed.
Okay, you just give me 1 second here. I'm just opening up my files. So, 2475. All right. So up next, we have on the docket, we have file 22-1148. The roll number we have in front of us is 0706-071-5000. The address is 2475 Portage Avenue. The 2023 assessed value has gone out at $2,149,000. And I do have a recommendation to make on this file. And as we go forward to my income stream, as always, I'd ask that you just have a look at the subject property's photographs, so we just don't have to come back again. And you'll note that it is a McDonald's that we're speaking of, and I believe it's on the corner of Whitewold and Portage Avenue. I was going to say Rita, but it's Whitewold, not Rita. Whitewold and Portage Avenue. And then for my recommendation, if we go to page 8 of my brief, you'll see the original income stream that we have applied to the subject. And so originally we had a C0 fast food restaurant as the tenant in place here at 3,539 square feet at $39.15 per square foot, which is model driven. And then we do have a 6% vacancy in place, a 3% expense, and an $8 shortfall per square foot, which brings us to our net operating income of $124,633. And then we've applied a 5.8% cap rate to give us the original valuation of $2,149,000. So this is all model driven. And then after the review that I've done, looking at the market data points that I had, and then keeping in line with the recommendations from the previous subjects that were of the same type, I am putting forth the same parameters for this subject as well. So the 3,539 square feet, it's now being valued at $34 per square foot. That gives us a revised total potential rent of $120,326. From there, we have applied the model vacancy of 6%, the modeled shortfall rate of $8 per square foot, and the other expense of 3%. To bring us to a revised net operating income of $108,015, so 108,015. And then from there, we've increased the cap rate to 6.5%. And then that reduces the assessment to the revised recommendation of $1,662,000, 1,662. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carrie, how do you feel about the recommendation?
Issues are narrowed, but I'd like to proceed, but it distills to cap rate just to the extent that helps expedite things.
Okay, do you have any questions of Roddy?
Not other than what's been asked and answered.
Okay, and Diane, any questions?
No, sir.
Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. So Carrie, you can proceed.
Could we please go straight to page 17? And board members and Mr. Pontinia, I apologize. There's going to be a couple of adjustments here because I put the wrong market rent. I intended to use 34 and I put in 33. So we might get our pens handy. I'm agreeing with the $34 market rent proposed by Mr. Pontinia. So the revised potential net income, I should say, is $120,326. And after deduction, including the 5% non-recoverable, using the rest of exactly the same parameters, though, the revised net operating income is $103,490. And then, as mentioned, I'm amending the cap rate request to 7%. That then results in a revised request this morning of $1,478,000. 1478000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Roddy, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Reimer. Thank you.
Diane?
No questions. Thank you.
And Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions, so that concludes that property. And does anybody need a break?
I'm okay to carry it forward, but I'll leave it up to you guys. I'm always willing to get these done. It looks like we're clipping along at a good pace, but if you guys want to take 5-10 minutes to stretch your legs, I'll leave it up to you.
I could use 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay, no worries.
Thank you. We'll reconvene the hearing this morning, and the next property on the docket is 2596 Portage Avenue. Any preliminary issues, either party?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, Roddy, you can proceed.
All right, so up next on the docket, we have file 22-2590. The roll number is 0707 002 6100. The address is 2596 Portage Avenue. The 2023 assessment has gone out at $1,704,000. And I do have a recommendation to make on this file, but I would ask the board members, as you're heading down to my income stream, if you can take a bit of a close look at the photos of the subject as we go, as they are relevant to our discussion on the valuation. And maybe I'll just go through them now so you guys can see what I'm speaking about. But if you look on page 2 on my pad eye view map, you'll see the parcel itself. It's on the corner of Wardham and Portage Avenue near Moray. On page 3, you'll note the subject that we're speaking of. So it is a previous Robin's Donuts that's now been sitting vacant for some time. And you'll note this large chunk of land that lays beside the subject property. So that chunk of land is going to come into relevancy. And that's why I wanted to bring your attention to that. So on page 4, you'll just see some more images of the subject. And then on page 5, some more images of the subject. So if I can bring your attention now to page 9, actually, of my brief, before I get into the evaluation. You'll note there that the original excess land calculation was based on this area here. So I have highlighted the area that we have included in our excess land calculation. So it was approximately 60%. From our review that we had done on this file, it was approximately 60% of the total parcel land area at 41,040 square feet. And so if we take that total land value that we have on file for the subject of $1,631,000, and then we multiply that by 60%, we do come out to the land value that's being put on of $979,000. And the subject property that we're speaking of, it's valued at $39.75 per square foot as a total, so on a land value approach. Okay, and so now having gone through all that, we can get into the valuation, and I can get into the adjustments that I made, as there are going to be several adjustments on this file. So if we look on the income stream on page 10, I'll give you guys a second to get there. We do have a C4 standard restaurant that was put in as the tenant class in place. So that would have been for the Robins at the time. And that's 2,244 square feet at $20.71 per square foot. That's just model driven. And then we have a model vacancy of 6%, an expense of 3%, and a shortfall of $8 per square foot. And that gives us the original net operating income of $41,297. So from there, the model has applied a 5.7% cap rate to the subject, and that gives us the capitalized value of what it appears to be $724,000, rounded. And then you'll note underneath the capitalized value that there is a line for additional land value. So that's that land value that we're speaking of. That's the excess land value that the model had put in place. And that's what gives us the total original assessment of $1,704,000. Okay, so that's our original valuation of the subject. So now that we went through that, perhaps we'll start with the first adjustment that I made. And the first adjustment that I made, just based on the data that I looked at and some of the details that I'm aware of this property, as I have personally worked on this file several times over the years, so I am aware of some of the details. The cap rate was, so the rental rate would remain the same. So that's 2,244 square feet at $20.71 per square foot. All of the original valuation remains the same. So it brings us to the net operating income of $41,297. The adjustment made was just to bring the cap rate up to 6%. So a 0.3% move on the cap rate. So that revises the value of the building itself, of that part of the valuation. It revises it down to $688,000. So step one in the adjustments is that we had increased the cap rate from 5.7 to 6%, and we have 688 for the new valuation on that. Step two of the adjustments to this valuation stream was an adjustment to the land value that was put in place. So we did have the original valuation in the square footage that was in our records. And after having done some work and having done some work myself on the past on this file, including at the municipal level, and then having done in conjunction with some of the work that I've done, we did make an adjustment to the area that we were calling excess land. And so the excess land area was actually adjusted to 17,250 square feet. And that 17,250 square feet that we're using is now being valued at $39.74 per square foot. So that $39.74, that's the model land value. So the adjustment came to the size of 17,250. So when you take that value, we include it in, we do have the building value of 688. And then we include the land value of 686. And you know what? I never rounded here, so let me just do this as I do this with you guys. Because I didn't round my numbers here, so you just give me 1 second. So 688 was the cost of the building, and then we include 686. That would be the cost of the land. So we're up to $1,374,000. So from that $1,374,000, there is another adjustment to be made. This adjustment is based on the current condition of the subject property. So from the information that was provided to me previously when I was doing some work, as well as what's currently in the brief that Mr. Reimer has provided, this subject actually has it has been stripped down to its bare minimum for its interior finish. It is what we would consider to be a shell condition. In other words, it's ready for a tenant to move in, but it's been pulled right down to its just basic components. And so it is in a shell condition at the moment. And so we did make an adjustment for that. And we did use $80 per square foot as an adjustment to that. And that's a reasonable amount to provide an allowance for the cost that it would take to bring the subject up to a condition where it could accept a new tenant. And so we do have 2,244 square feet at $80 per square foot. That equals $180,000 rounded. So 179,520 or 180 rounded. So if we then take the value that I had put forward of 1,374,000, and if we minus 180 from that, we do have a revised value of 1,194,000. And that is my recommendation on this file. And thank you for going through that with me. There's many steps involved there, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Carrie, any questions? Do you accept it?
We can't, we're very close now. Don't accept it, but no questions, other than, and it's not, you know what? No, it's not a fair question. I have no questions at this time. I'll explain to my presentation. Much that we agree on that.
Okay, thank you. Diane, any questions?
Sorry, I missed what the reduction was for, the 180 reduction.
So the 180 reduction, that was based on taking, so we have an ability when we're valuing a property, we can apply our original valuation parameters. But if the subject itself has been stripped down to its shell condition, so when Mr. Reimer is going through his presentation, I'm sure he'll take us through his pictures. They're included in his brief. You'll note that the condition of the subject inside has been stripped right down. Like it's not ready for a tenant right now, but so it would require some capital to be put in to bring it up to a level of quality and condition that would then be acceptable to have a tenant move in. And so we are able to make an allowance for that when we have those conditions that come up. And in this situation, it was applicable. We have done it in the past because of the characteristics of this particular subject. And so we did use $80 per square foot, and that was on the size of the improvement that's on the parcel. So that's 2,244 square feet at $80 per square foot.
Okay, I got it now. I just couldn't grasp it when you said it the first time, I guess.
Sorry, I know there was a lot of tendrils involved in this one, so.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Michelle, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions, so Carrie, you can proceed.
Okay, so there is, Mr. Chairman, a number of moving parts, but as I say, we're actually very much closer now. Could we go initially, please, to my page 21? So from top to bottom, other than the adjustment for the shell space, we differ, but here's what it comes down to now. My NOI, as you can see on page 21, is $50,659. So it's actually higher than the department's by about $9,000. The reason for that is if the board members can recall, this is the former Robbins Donuts that was on Portage Avenue. They left, I have to check the dates. They've been gone for a few years now. Yeah, March 2018. So Robbins shut down this location in March of 2018. So by the reference date, it had been, call it 3 years. What we were advised, and just to give the board the context, we were advised that the condition of the property when they left was such that it made no sense whatsoever in terms of trying to secure a new tenant because of the quality and the way those improvements had deteriorated. It made no sense to keep them in place, which is why they stripped it down to shell to make it actually more attractive. So we valued the property, as you can see on page 21, as if this wasn't a fully operational, good quality restaurant at $30 a foot. We've applied though the higher vacancy allowance because of those vacancy issues. That's how we get to our $50,659. The reason I'm bringing this to the board's attention is we're valuing it as a premium quality restaurant with that kind of rent, obviously. But what comes with that when you're talking about the restaurants, these high caliber restaurants, especially with drive-through operations, and this property is set up with the former Robbins to have the drive-through, as I'll show on the overhead in a minute. There are significant demands that these tenants and occupants place for land and in order both for parking but also for the traffic flow. So where we differ now, and as you can see on my page 21, we're exactly the same now on the deduction for the shell space. So what this all comes down to now actually is the discussion over and it isn't even the rate. We're applying a higher rate per square foot, but our land area that we're considering excess is only 9,250 square feet. We've applied a $50 rate to that. So our total, as you can see there, our total requested adjustment for the excess land is $462,500. One further caveat, I'm changing my cap rate to 7%. So the only thing that changes there, same NOI, applying the 7% cap rate. The income-based value for the restaurant building on site itself then becomes $724,000. And using the same parameters for the excess land and the shelf space deductions, the total revised request this morning is $1,006,000, 1,006,000. So with it coming and for the board's reference, Mr. Pontini and I both inspected the property, and on page 25, you can see, you don't need to go there, but there are pictures showing the current condition of the building, and it is indeed just shell that's waiting to be finished if and when a tenant is secured, hopefully when. So now then, I'm going to focus then on the excess land calculation. Could we go back one page, please, to page 20? Now recall my comments as to the actual excess land component. And I think this is where we seem to differ. The building you see there on that overhead photograph, that's the Robbins site, and you can see the drive-through starts on the west end of the building, goes around the back, and then out through the east for the drive-through operations itself. So you've got two things going on. You've got to have sufficient parking for the in-store dining, and you've got to have sufficient space for the drive-through operations as well for the existing building. And so I'm not there yet in terms of the adjustment to the area of 17,250. I'm suggesting as you can see with the crosshatch, or not crosshatch, but the outline section, pardon me, at the south, that would be at the southeast part of the site. That's the part that I'm considering to be developable. In my respectful opinion, you couldn't, if there's going to be a new development there, that would be the maximum area without impeding the existing building. And certainly you can't steal from Paul to pay Peter, as it were, and because you're not going to secure the tenant for the existing building if you impede both the traffic flows and the parking required for that building. So that's what the difference comes down to, is the area. The rate actually we're applying, as I say, is higher at $50 a foot. And so going back to page 21, then using that area, we're at an adjustment of $462,500. I have asked, Mr. Pontini and I have had a chance to look at this property in the past, and I have asked the owners, what their intent with it is, and they were very, very blunt in their comments. It's like, well, that's all well and good that there's a piece of land there. There's absolutely no demand for any development on it. And going further now, obviously, since March of 18, there hasn't even been any demand for the existing building itself, notwithstanding their efforts to secure a tenant. So there is no prospect of development of that parcel, even in the midterm, based on the situation as it exists right now. We are adjusting for the excess land, notwithstanding that lack of demand, but certainly believe that the adjustment we've applied, $462,500, is fair. And then with that being said, I would ask that the value be reduced to $1,006,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Roddy, any questions?
Roddy, you're muted.
You just give me 1 second. I just had that 1,006,000. I just wanted to. Okay, yeah, no, so we're very close. I appreciate all the work that Mr. Reimer's put in place on this one. This file has a lot of moving parts, as he mentioned, and sometimes it's difficult to allocate all those things. So I appreciate that. I do think that the difference does come down to that area. I would like to say that we have done some work on the past, and we did hammer out the area that I was currently using that was hammered out previously. So I'm comfortable with the area that we previously used. I respect Mr. Reimer's re-analysis of it to give us his slightly updated area from what we used. But besides that, we're in agreement on some of the other principles. So no, I was going to ask a question, but it's okay. I'm okay for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
So just so my mind can get this straight, the city is saying it's 17,250 square feet at $39.74 for a value of $686. Carrie, you're saying it's 9,250 square feet that could be redeveloped at $50 a square foot for 462.5. Is that correct?
Exactly right.
Okay, that's the rest I can sort of gather myself. Yeah.
I guess, can I get in there again, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
I did want to include that because I think that is relevant with the what we're getting to there, and so I just wanted to bring out that the value that I put forward, that 1,194. If we take the area 41,040, the value that we're putting forward does come down to a price per square foot of $29.09. If we look at my land comparables, it's well within the range at $29 at the rate that we're putting forward. And at Mr. Reimer's, if we were to take the total area, the value brings us down to $24.51, which you have to ask yourself, $24.51 for a parcel that's portage facing. It's you know, I'm not really sure if we have any comparable information to support that. But I just wanted to include that because it is relevant when we look at it as a whole on a price per square foot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I respond to that, please?
You certainly can.
Don't accept it. And Mr. Ponzini, I want to be very clear. We agreed to the value. You've referenced that we've agreed to the value for the previous cycle. This information is to the area calculation with what I'd been using prior to for my purposes. So my opinion on the area hasn't changed, certainly, but the land area.
Yep, no, I understand. It's just a difference of opinion on it.
I get it. So, Mr. Chairman, my land area at $50 a foot, we believe continues to be appropriate. But don't forget, if this is obviously a very significant professional landowner and developer, when I asked them the question, why haven't you developed this? It's because of complete lack of demand. So again, we're putting the excess land value on it. There simply isn't demand. It's just not there. So notwithstanding the rate per square foot based on the department's higher land area, we believe at $50 a foot in the land area we suggested is very appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, any questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious on the demand aspect of it. Is there something like, again, it's a portage facing site, like is there anything that's inhibiting the demand for that type of property? It's looking ready for development. There's some other side things with the extra land. What is there anything that hasn't been presented already that's a downside to that property that's lowering demand, is my question, in your opinion?
Yeah, so in my opinion, it's a function of two things. A, obviously, when you've got the existing tenant leaving in March of 18 and the landlord being unable to even fill the existing building, having done the work they've done, that just indicates a complete lack of demand, even for the, and the building, it's a shell space, but I've been out there, obviously, it's in reasonable shape for, a good quality restaurant that might want to come in there with the drive-through operation. So there's not even demand to fill that space. That'll be a function of, we're talking about quite a ways up portage. So it's going to be a function of a lack of demand at that site. And going further, when you look at the configuration of the site, it's an irregular shaped site, and while there is, and I'm admitting that there's a possibility if the demand's there to do something on that site, it's very limited in that you want to have sufficient parking, you want to have enough, you want to take into account both buildings if there's going to be a second building. And when they looked at the options, I asked them specifically about the options to put an additional development at the east end of that site. And while there has been in past years, there's been some discussion about possibilities, they invariably fall flat because the potential folks that might be interested in occupying a new building there look at exactly these things. They look at the traffic flow, they look at the configuration, and it's just not, it just has fallen flat. So that's the reason that I was given, that there just haven't been any feasible opportunities at all to develop that part of it. Compounded now by the fact that trying to fill the original building and have been unable to do so.
Mr. Chair, can I ask an additional question?
Sure. Michelle, are you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Dan.
So, Mr. Reimer, would there be a possibility of dropping that building and building something else on that site altogether?
If they chose to scrape it and start over, that is certainly a possibility.
And
Yeah.
what would those possibilities be?
Right now, they're zero, or I should say right now, as of the reference date, they were zero. There's just been no. They made the decision to try and, to bring the building back to shell, to make it very attractive for what they would hope to have, like chain restaurant and such.
Yeah,
But they haven't taken the further step, I imagine, and now I'm speculating. If this building sits in shell condition, it can't sit in shell condition indefinitely. It's already been, as of the reference date, it was fully 3 years. So your question's a good one. And I think ultimately, if there's still no takers, then that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to scrape it and start over.
Okay. Thank you.
That was a very good question, Diane. That was my question.
Well, then obviously it's a good question, right?
Well, since the ownership is professional, as you said, my question was what Diane alluded to, demolish it.
But that's going to be the next step, right? Like they still want to give. There's obviously been an investment in the existing building. There was an investment to take it back to shell with the hope that, and this was, it was in just prior to the pandemic when they took it back to shell. Now they've been hit with all the circumstances we've been talking about. But I'm agreeing with you, Mr. Chairman. This won't sit like this indefinitely. At some point, they're going to make the decision. We're better off. Just if they can't secure anybody, they're going to be better off scraping and starting over.
So, do they continue to heat it in the winter?
Yeah.
Oh, they do.
Yeah. I mean, bare minimum, they're not having it, but yes, they can't let pipes freeze and such.
Right.
So
okay. And that was my only question about the heating. So that concludes this property. The next one on the docket is 3106 Portage Avenue, and any preliminary issues with this?
No, none for myself.
Okay, Roddy, you can make the presentation.
Okay, and I'll just be presenting on this one. So up next, we have file 22-974. The roll number we have is 0756 452 6000. The address we have on file is 3106 Portage Avenue. And the 2023 assessment has gone out at $1,135,000. So we'll note that this is a CMRRE restaurant that we're speaking of as the same as, or similar to some of the other files. 2 buildings are included on this property description. It's a 1-story building, and we have an actual and effective year of 1970 and 1998, as I believe there was the original building, and then an addition that was built in around 1998. And then we do have the leasable area total of 4,500 square feet. On page 2, I have included a pad-eye view of the subject property, so you can see the parcel's orientation in relation to Portage Avenue there. And then on page 3, I've included a pictometry overhead view, so you can see the subject property. On page 4, I have included a north-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5, I've included some Google Street View images, and this would be from the 2022 map overlay. And we can see the subject there. So we do have some income and expense information that we've received from them, so we're okay with that. There's no sales history or lease information that we have on file. For my comparables, I have included some comparables. Not all of them are going to be within the same neighborhood. There are a few there, but some of them are from within other parts of the city, but they are all freestanding restaurants. And they are all on main roads. So Pembina Highway, Henderson, St. Mary's, McPhillips, Ness, Portage Avenue. And they show us the range of what these properties are achieving. And we do have a range from what looks to be $16.65 at the lower end, and then taking us to, I believe, $23.50 at the higher end. On page 8, you'll see the subject's income valuation, and this is all model driven. So we do have 4,500 square feet. We have it at a modeled rent of $17.67 per square foot. We have applied vacancy model parameters of 6% vacancy, a 3% expense, and an $8 shortfall per square foot to bring us to the net operating income of $70,342. And then we've applied a cap rate of 6.2% to give us our overall value of $1,135,000. So you'll note on page 9 the income and value summary of the subject property. On page 10, we have included the cap rate information that we include with all of our briefs. And then on page 11 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 12, and taking us to the end of our brief, is the subject's income and expense mailer information. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
And Carrie, any questions?
Specifically, again, Mr. Chairman, with the in the context of cap rate being virtually the only issue here, Mr. Pontier, the 6.2, that was the modeled cap rate in this case, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That's my question.
Thank you. And Diane, any questions?
No, thank you.
And Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
So, Karate, the mailer on page 13.
Yep.
And 12. This is owner occupied, is that correct?
Mr. Reimer might be able to let us know that. It was hard for me to figure that part out because there's no income provided. There's actually almost no information whatsoever on the income and expense sections of the mailer. But then we do have some information in regards to the tenant that they are paying. We have a rental rate that they're paying per month, but we don't have an area provided. So I did some work based on that. And if you take what they're providing of $6,750 per month, that does give us a total annual rental value of $81,000. So that they didn't write that in the income section, so I can't definitively say that that's what they receive. But if I did the math on what they're declaring for their monthly rent, it gives us an ARV of $81,000. And because they didn't provide an area, I have to rely on what we have on file. So if we use our area of 4,500 square feet, it does give us an actual of $18 per square foot. So that's when I looked at the modeled rental rates and I sort of thought, well, it's within range. It's difficult to say exactly what this is. I don't know if it's gross or net, and that'll also make a difference in what the actuals would be that are received. So I had to sort of piece this one together as best as I could.
So you've only included the signature page of the mailer?
This is all the information we have on the mailer. So what you're seeing in front of you, that's what I have on file for the 2020 mailer.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Actually, I just had one more question, Mr. Chair, please. Is there any permits on this one?
That's a good question. If you just give me 1 second. No, there's no permits of any major value. I went through all the permits that we had on file and all of them were under 10K. So there was some permits, but they're nothing of any major value that I could find.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Carrie, you can make your presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Actually, in the department's brief, and I found the same thing, the pages that for the INEs that were submitted were out of order. I'll get to that in a second, but what this comes down to, if we could turn initially, please, to my page 17. This is obviously not a fast food chain restaurant. This is a local operation, now leased, and it is a leased property. It's now leased to a restaurant called Cork and Flame. They are paying a net rent, I can confirm that, a total annual net rent of $81,000 under a lease that was commencing in 2019, just prior to the pandemic. And then running, as you can see on page 17, running through that income stream, we actually come in at a net operating income that is $68,650. So in effect, that is within, I think, $1,500 of the department's NOI, notwithstanding that we have different routes to get there. It is it's roughly, well, call it $2,800 difference. So there's not a lot to choose from. So this again comes down to capitalization rate. I am suggesting in this case, for the reasons I'm going to talk about briefly, I'm suggesting a significantly elevated cap rate, and there's reasons for it. I am suggesting, continuing to suggest the 775 rate. So you can see there, I come in at a value of 886,000 rounded. For the board's information, I'm going to provide a figure that if the board were inclined to apply 7.5%, then the valuation would be $915,000 using the same NOI, but it's a 7.5% rate. But if we go just prior to page 16, the reason that I'm suggesting the elevated rate is, as I mentioned, we're now outside of the realm of these higher quality fast food operations and into a local operation. On page 17, the third paragraph, I'll just read through this a little bit. The previous restaurant, this property's had issues for several years now. The previous restaurant that had been in there was experiencing a lot of trouble. This is all prior to the pandemic. And the landlord actually granted a rent reduction from $81,000 that he had been collecting from the prior tenant down to $63,000 for 2017 in an attempt to help that tenant maintain a viable operation. Shortly after, though, unfortunately, that tenant failed. In October of 2017, they left, and notwithstanding the reduction that had been offered and was being paid, they still couldn't make a go of it. The property was then 100% vacant from October of 2017 until June of 19. So there was a substantial vacancy, obviously, at this site, reflecting some of the difficulties for these local operations to make a go of it there. This, as I say, this doesn't have the same covenant as obviously a fast food chain, and that's a factor in our respectful submission. And therefore, given the much higher, what we perceive to be a much higher risk with these types of operations, again, in the context of the pandemic, for everything we've talked about, I am suggesting a rate that is substantially elevated at 7.75%. If I could turn briefly, starting at page 21. So I have reordered the pages. I found the same thing Mr. Fontanilla did, where what was submitted to the department was out of order and it was a little difficult to interpret without reordering them. So on page 21, there's no income and expenses that's submitted on this component of it. They do indicate the vacant space is nil, of course, because they did secure that tenant. If you then go 2 pages further, so where are we at? Oh, there we go. Page 23, please. So this is and I can confirm several things. This is the new tenant that was secured starting in June of 2019. It is a net rent, as you can see under item column towards the right, column 414, a net lease. So it is a net rental rate that's being achieved. And the monthly rent as shown in column 408 is $6,750 a month. So it is that $81,000 that we're applying in our evaluation, and it's consistent. It's very, very close to what the department's model had actually kicked out on this. So I can confirm all of that. There is, incidentally, on page 25, then the rental income loss that they indicate there for pandemic assistance was $5,062, just for the board's information. If we then turn briefly, and I won't go through all the pages, I had mentioned the previous tenants and the difficulties that they were having. If we turn to page 41, please. And this simply goes to my comments as to the issues with the previous tenant. It was a tenant, as indicated on page 40, different tenant, Black Hills Holdings. And what the owner states there is since October 2017 is vacant. Prospective tenants shy away. And this was the initial rental rate was the same $6,750 net per month. As mentioned, they agreed to a reduction in an attempt to help this tenant stay viable, but ultimately it did not stay viable and they vacated in October 17th. So again, it comes all down to capitalization rate, and for the reasons in the history of this property, certainly we're suggesting a substantially elevated rate and request the value of $886,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Roddy, any questions?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Diane?
On page 9, the picture there, what is that? What looks like a wood structure there? Is that part of this building? Like what? Just trying to figure out, is that like outdoor seating? Is that like a canopy over something?
Page 9, there we go. Very good question. I don't know. I'm not sure.
There's a better picture on page 4 of the.
I've been at the property and it's outdoor seating.
Okay.
That's why I asked about the permit, because it was an established area. It's a significantly sized area, quite nice.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
That was my guess.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was maybe a barbecue pit where they were cooking because they're called Flame. That's where I was like, I wasn't sure. Okay, thank you.
And Michelle?
Just there is a 10-year lease on it now, correct? With the
There is indeed, yeah. Providing that this tenant can remain viable, then he's back to where he was a few years back as far as the rental revenue.
So it started in June 2019. So it went through, the same tenant went through obviously the pandemic through to current day, and she's doing okay so far, eh?
I don't know if they're doing okay. I can't comment on that at all. What I can say is that as far as I'm aware, as of the reference date, there was no rental arrears as they had been with the previous tenant. But certainly, in my respectful opinion, that doesn't mitigate the risk for this type of operation at this property, especially with the history. But yes, I'm not aware of any arrears as of the reference date.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
And I have no questions. So that concludes this property, and we're on to the last one. And I understand there's a preliminary issue on non-cooperation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you're still proceeding with that?
I am proceeding with the non-cooperation, yes.
Okay, just let me get to the brief. Okay, Roddy, you can present your case on the non-co-op.
Okay. So up next we have file 22-3143. The roll number is 0756-016-3900. The address is 3401 Portage Avenue, and the 2023 assessment has gone out at $2,800,000 even. And so if we're dealing with a non-cooperation first, if I can direct your attention to page 12 of my brief. I'll give you guys a second to get there. So this is the information that was provided to us by Canada Post. So we do have a delivery that was received. So we have the item number at the top, which is the tracking number. And we have the date that it was delivered, 2021-06-14. We don't have a signature in place, but Canada Post doesn't have that as a requirement as long as the package was delivered to the location. This is what the form alludes to, that it was delivered. And then on page 13, if you'll take a look at that, you'll see that the item had gone out June 9th from Winnipeg. By June 11th, it was in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then June 14th, it was delivered to New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. And it was delivered at 7:42 a.m. on June 14th. And we have another tracking information number here. So this one would have been previous to that. This was delivered, sent 2021 August 6th, whereas the one that we first spoke about was 2021 September 24th. And once again, we can see the tracking number there. We can see that it was delivered on 2021 6/14. And then once again, we have the information provided here from Canada Post showing that it was delivered to New Glasgow. And then on page 17, these are the just general information that's included when we send out the income and expense mailer information to the subject. And then here on page 19, you'll note that we do have that tracking number there at the top, the LP 491546908CA. If we go back up again to the documents that I've provided, it is the same tracking number, LP 49154666908CA. That is the same tracking number that's at the top of all of the Canada Post documents. So that's what we use as our link to let us know that it was specifically with this mailer that it went out at, as it has the same tracking number there. And you'll note that it does have an address that's in, it looks to be Stellarton, Nova Scotia. And then as we go forward, this is just included are just the photocopies of it would have been reproductions of the original mailer that was sent out to the subject. And then that takes us all the way to the end of my brief there for the subject's income and expense mailer information. And then that's my presentation.
Thank you. Carrie, any questions, comments?
I have no questions. I have no reply. And should the board choose to grant the non-compliance penalties in this case, I would seek a confirmation of the assessment under 5401. Thank you.
Thank you. The board will take a 5-minute recess.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So you're giving the 2 years of where the Canada Post shows it's delivered, but you give us the 1 year of the letter. So how do we know that the address was still the same on the letter that was sent the 2 years prior?
Well, this is all for the same year. This isn't the 2 years prior. So all of these Canada Post delivery notices, they are all for the 2020 expense mailer year. So this isn't 2 separate years. What it looks to be is it would have been the same document would have been sent twice in the mail.
Oh, twice. And why would the same document go out twice?
There might have been one mailer that had gone out. There might have been the original mailing that has gone out and then the certified mailer. And for some reason we had another certified mailer. I'm not exactly sure as to why. This is just the information that we had on file. So usually when I compile the income and expense mailer information, I just take everything that we had on file.
Okay.
But
it doesn't show that it went to a post office box. It shows that it was delivered to the actual address, correct?
It does, yeah. So if you look at the tracking number at the top, that's where we can use you can use that to then orient us to the fact that it was tied to the cover letter of the mailer that was sent to the subject.
Okay. And you know full well that there's no New Glasgow and that whatever name of the town, they're the same thing.
I mean, I'm not a geographer.
I know,
so
but
I'm just going on, I live in Manitoba. I'm not sure about the.
Yeah, because that says Stellarton
but,
and the other says New Glasgow. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. That's a fair question. I'm not exactly sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
The only question I had was New Glasgow or Stellarton.
I've seen both. Like I've seen, ultimately, I'm going to put it this way. I've done my due diligence on the address and hence I have no reply.
Okay, thank you. So we'll recess for 5 minutes. We'll reconvene the hearing this morning, and the panel has debated the issue of the assessor's request that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation under section 53(3)B of the MAA. And the board has decided that we will deny that request. And there is some inconsistencies in the tracking system that was submitted into evidence. And that is our reason. Thank you. And Roddy, you can start with your presentation.
Okay, so we've dealt with that. So let's go now to the income stream. And by going to the income stream, I'm hoping that you guys can just take a look at the photo evidence as always, just so you know what we're talking about there, and which is the McDonald's on the corner of Cavalier Drive and Portage Avenue. And so we can see on page 5 the Google Street View images of the subject property. So keeping in line with previous recommendations, I think you guys know where this is going here, but I do have a C0 fast food tenant. We do have 4,835 square feet at $38.31 per square foot. We have applied model parameters of 6% vacancy, 3% expense, and $8 shortfall per square foot to bring us to a net operating income of $166,571, which we've then applied a 5.95% cap rate to bring us to our total assessment that went out at $2,800,000. And oh, I actually didn't have my recommendation form open here. If you just give me 1 second. So I'm going to be following the same recommendations that I did earlier. So the rental rate now is going to be reduced from $38.31 to $34 per square foot. So we now have 4,835 square feet at $34 per square foot to give us a revised total potential rent of $164,390. And then from there, we've applied the model parameters of 6% vacancy, $8 shortfall per square foot, and a 3% other for expense for the expense allowance to bring us to a revised net operating income of $147,570. So $147,570. And then from there, we've applied the cap rate of 6.5% to give us a revised value of $2,270,000. $2,270,000. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carrie, any questions?
Other than what's been asked and answered? No. Thank you.
And do you accept the
I
recommendation?
do not. We're closer, but I do not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Roddy, you can, I guess you've completed your presentation.
Yeah, I think so. There's not really much else to add here. I'm just taking a look. We went over the pictures. There's nothing to add for sales history. We have the comp information there. No, you know what? I think that should be okay.
That's it? Okay.
My income summary looks okay, and then the cap rate, and we went over the income and expense mailer. Yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Diane, any questions?
No, sir. Thank you.
And Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. So Carrie?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 17, please. Very same discussion has been held this morning. It distills to cap rate and non-recoverables. As you can see on page 17, we're using the same $34 rate. However, we come in at a net operating income of $141,389. That difference being the 5% non-recoverables. And please note, I'm amending my capitalization rate request to 7%. And therefore, using the same NOI and the 7% cap, my revised request this morning is $2,020,020,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Roddy, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
And Diane?
No questions. Thank you.
And Michelle?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. We have heard all of the items scheduled today, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Roddy.